So according to the 2023 third quarter debt index by DebtBusters, consumers are using a big chunk of their salaries to service debt. Those in higher income brackets were particularly found to be battling to manage their debt. Mmadikwa Phoshoko is a debt counseling monitoring officer at the National Credit Regulator and joins us now to take a look at this issue. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your time this afternoon. Perhaps you can help us piece together the puzzles. What does the picture show in terms of South Africans being indebted? Which South Africans? Can you break it down for us?
Look, South Africans are actually indebted across the board because everybody is feeling the pinch, from the middle class to the higher class. The low income, it just gets worse. Most consumers are unable to actually service their debts. You find that one month they're paying Peter, the next month they're paying Paul, or they're just unable to actually cope overall with the high costs of living. So across the board, everybody's really feeling the pinch with everything going up. Petrol is going up. Well, at least it's come down a bit now, but the effects haven't really been felt, filtering down to the consumers.
What do the numbers suggest?
Basically, they suggest that consumers are currently strained, and it doesn't look like it's getting any better. In terms of cars and houses, consumers are falling behind, unfortunately, in the repayments, especially as we've seen with recent interest rate hikes. So they're really feeling the pinch in terms of paying off their debts and trying to balance just having sufficient money to get through the month. So it's not looking too good, but hopefully, things will get better, but for now it's not too promising in terms of the stats.
What is the debt used for?
So the debt is mainly used for consumers to just survive and get through the month. So the basics are really what's really getting the consumers down. The cost of food has gone up, so you find that you have to decide whether you're going to pay more on the bond or you're going to make sure that there's food in the house. Are you going to make sure that you've got petrol to get to work to at least, try and survive and get some sort of income, or are you going to service debts? Are you going to keep buying clothes on credit because you don't have cash? What's going to happen thereafter? So it's quite a complex where consumers just are trying to decide what's more important and the immediate needs that need to be serviced. And they're kind of hoping maybe next month things will get better. Maybe I'll get a bonus in December and try and catch up with my payments. But the everyday things that need to be covered are basically what you need to cover immediately. School fees are also falling behind. So it's really about survival and trying to get through the month in one piece and hoping for a miracle in the next month.
So it's not necessarily about affording luxuries?
No, not at all. It's really about basic needs. A lot of people have cut down on luxuries. So you're finding they're not going out as much. You find that we see that they're not buying in terms of retail and clothing as much. It's more really servicing the bigger debt and just trying to keep the assets and making sure that you've got a house, you've got a car to basically get through and just try and survive the month, basically.
Ma'am, then in enters what do they call them? You'll help us with that term. So the people that call you and say, are you in debt? We can help you manage your debt and we can negotiate with your lender to make sure that you pay less than what you are paying now. What are those people called, or companies?
So debt counselors are registered as individuals with the NCR. They're not registered as a company. And honestly, somebody calling you and telling you, I can help you with your debt, who told them that you've got debt, number one? So consumers just really need to be careful with anybody reaching out to them, telling them they can help them with a problem that they haven't really told anyone. So for consumers who want to get assistance with debt, we've got debt counselors across the country in almost every town, basically. So we normally just encourage consumers, because of the number of scams that are going around, don't just give your phone or your details over the phone to somebody that you've never met. You can't even verify if they are who they say they are. So it's always best to go to a debt counselor that is within your own town. So should you have a problem, you can always go to their offices and actually consult on a one-on-one basis.
These debt counselors or debt busters, where do they get their mandates from? If they're not companies and they're individuals, are they registered? Do they need to be registered? Where do they get their mandate from?
So basically, all registered debt counselors are regulated by the NCR. They don't have a mandate from the NCR. They are there for consumers who need assistance. So if I know that I'm having problems with my debt, nobody else can come to me and say, I know you're having problems, can I assist you? Unless I tell them. So you go to a person when you need help. You only go to a doctor when you've got a headache. The doctor doesn't come to you and say, well, I can help you with your headache, when they don't even know you've got a headache. So for anybody calling you out of the blue, telling you they can assist you, where do they get off? How do they know that you've got a problem? Unless you actually, as a consumer, give them the mandate to actually assist you with your debts and to negotiate a reduced interest or reduced installments, and then you can take it from there. So it really has to do with the consumer giving the mandate to the debt counselor who is registered. You can check them out on our website to see which debt counselors are available within your town.
Have you received complaints about these debt busters or these credit helpers, for lack of a better expression? Because there are some people who have relayed how they will get into a deal with a debt buster, and they say, we'll negotiate for you, and for 5 years you're not able to do anything. You're not able to get anything because you are servicing this debt not only to your lender but to these credit busters.
Okay, so debt counselors, when you initially join debt counseling, they should actually advise you that, look, these are the fees that are associated with the debt counseling processes. The debt counselor will be paid for the services that they are providing. Those fees are regulated by the NCR to make sure that it's already an over-indebted consumer, so we don't want them to overcharge you. So it's a regulated amount that they should disclose up front. Once they do the restructuring, the consumer actually also needs to consent to the proposal that they are comfortable with how they've restructured. So they can't all of a sudden offer 50 Rand for a car that you're paying. So the problem is that most consumers just say, okay, somebody's taking care of their debt, and they leave it. They don't actually communicate with the debt counselors. And you find that the consumer is unaware that there is a process going on because they just agreed over the phone. They send through their documents. And while the debt counselor is actually doing the proposal or they are negotiating with your credit providers, the consumers are not interacting with the debt counselor, or the consumer is not getting as much feedback as they would like to. But if it's somebody who is within your town, you know you can always pop into the office. Unlike if it's somebody that you basically decided to pick over the internet, or they called you and you provided all your documents. So it's really important for the consumer to be actively involved in the process and to actually have a realistic budget when they approach the debt counselor to say, look, this is where I'm having a problem. How can we fix it? Because this is how much I need to live. This is how much is left for the creditors. Do you think that this would work out? And then once the debt counselor has reached out to your creditors to verify the balances and the installments that you've given them, then they can start working on the proposal and provide you with feedback that, look, based on what you can afford, this is how we're going to restructure it. While you're under debt review, you won't have access to credit because you're already over indebted. So if they add another creditor on top of that, I mean, already on the budget that's left for you, it means you're going back and taking out money from that. So while you're under debt review, you can't take more credit because that would be reckless of the credit provider, because basically they're taking out money from what you need in order to survive and make sure that you get through the month.
Speaking of recklessness of credit providers, what then is the role of the NCR when it comes to some South Africans getting SMSs maybe from a credit provider saying that we have identified you, you qualify for 300,000 Rand. That time you're not employed, that time you can't even pay that back, but you are being offered monies that are quite exorbitant. And so where do you fit in regulating the people that loan people money?
Okay, so the first thing is you get SMSs maybe because you've opted into some sort of marketing at some point in your life. whether you know it or not. Maybe it was a cookie, maybe it was a link. So maybe that's how they're getting your information firstly to actually contact you for those SMSs. Once you receive an SMS to say that you qualify, qualifying doesn't mean automatically you'll get that whole sum. So they need to basically do an assessment to see if you can afford the repayments. Once that assessment has been done and you do qualify, the thing is consumers also lie when they want money. So it's a matter of balancing both, because as a consumer, if you lie, you're kind of committing fraud. And the credit provider is also responsible to make sure that whatever you have disclosed, as far as possible, they can verify that those are your expenses in terms of the loans that you're paying, the accounts that you're paying. And obviously also in terms of the amount that you spend for the household, it also needs to be reasonable. Once we get a complaint as NCR to say that, look, there is reckless lending here, we would then basically go back to the credit provider and say, okay, give us the application form, the assessment that was initially done in terms of Section 80 to see if there was actually any reckless lending. And then based on whatever facts that we find from there, we'll make a finding in terms of whether there was reckless lending or if the consumer did lie and they just need to be liable for the accounts that they actually took out.
What rights do consumers have? So you'll find someone who is servicing their debt in terms of their house maybe for 15 or 18 years, and in the 18th year they fall on hard times and they're not able to meet their obligation. Then there's a threat that we're going to take back that which is ours, even though you have serviced that loan for a good 18 years. Is there anything that can be done to protect consumers from such?
Well, firstly, once you know that you are facing a problem, it's always advisable to approach the credit provider and say, look, this is where I stand, this is the difficulty I'm having, can we restructure the debt? So that's the first point of contact. If you've been retrenched or you find that you've fallen on hard times for some or other reason, there's also Credit Life that covers disability retrenchment. You would actually have to look at the individual Credit Life policy to see what it covers, and that can possibly actually pay for a few months, or it can actually cover the balance. So each situation is different, and the consumers need to make sure that as soon as they're aware that they are going to experience a problem, they do approach the credit provider. If they can't get any assistance from the credit provider, they can also approach a debt counselor to negotiate on their behalf.
Alrighty, thank you so much for availing yourself this afternoon, Ma'am Phoshoko. Mmadikwa Phoshoko, Debt Counseling Monitoring Officer with the National Credit Regulator.